The smell hits them first, a thick metallic stench that clings to the back of the throat like wet wool. Detective Miller, a 20-year veteran of the homicide squad who has seen everything from cartel hits to ritualistic killings, stops dead in the doorway. He covers his mouth, his face draining of all color. Behind him, a rookie officer turns away and collapses to his knees, retching. Inside this ordinary suburban living room, the walls are not painted. They are sprayed. In the center of the floor lies a shape that no longer resembles a human being. It is a puzzle of flesh, reconstructed with a cruel, surgical precision that defies logic. This wasn't just a murder. It was a masterpiece of human depravity. This is the case that broke the men who solved the unthinkable. The year was 1994. The location? A quiet, tree-lined cul-de-sac in Willow Creek, Ohio. This was the kind of neighborhood where people left their back doors unlocked and children rode bicycles until the streetlights flickered on. The victim was 24-year-old Elena Vance. Elena was a local librarian, known for her soft voice, her love for Victorian literature, and her habit of feeding the stray cats behind the town square. She lived alone in a small blue-shingled house she had inherited from her grandmother. To the world, Elena was invisible in the best way possible, safe and utterly ordinary. But beneath the surface of Willow Creek's tranquility, something was festering. For weeks leading up to the event, neighbors reported a heavy feeling in the air. A local handyman, Thomas Thorne, would later tell police that the birds had stopped singing in the trees surrounding Elena's property. The date was October 12th. A cold, biting wind was sweeping through the valley, carrying the first scent of winter. Elena had missed 2 shifts at the library. No one had seen her light go on in 48 hours. When her sister Sarah used a spare key to enter the house, her scream was heard 3 blocks away. When the lead investigators entered the Vance residence, they expected a struggle. They expected a robbery gone wrong. What they found was a carefully curated gallery of nightmares. The living room had been stripped of its furniture, pushed neatly against the walls to create a stage. In the center, Elena Vance was displayed. The killer had not just taken her life. He had dismantled her identity. The autopsy would later reveal that the perpetrator possessed an advanced, almost academic knowledge of human anatomy. The incisions were clean, made with a scalpel-like instrument. But it was the arrangement that made the detectives sick. The killer had removed Elena's heart and placed it in a vintage teacup on the coffee table. Her eyes had been replaced with polished black stones. Most hauntingly, the killer had spent hours sewing lace from her own curtains into her skin, attempting to turn the victim into a human porcelain doll. There was no blood on the floor. The killer had cleaned the scene, mopping up the evidence, leaving only the art behind. The investigation began with a frantic search for a monster. Lead detective Marcus Thorne described the atmosphere as suffocating. The first suspect was an ex-boyfriend, a man named Julian Vane, who had a history of stalking. However, Julian had a rock-solid alibi. He was in custody for a DUI 30 miles away on the night of the murder. The police were back at zero. Then, a breakthrough came from an unlikely source: the local hardware store. A clerk remembered a man buying a specific type of surgical silk and heavy-duty cleaning agents 3 days before the disappearance. The man was described as polite, well-dressed, and uncomfortably calm. He had used a credit card under the name Arthur Penelagon, a name that turned out to belong to a man who had died in the 1950s. As the detectives dug deeper, they found the nest. In the crawlspace beneath Elena's house, they found a small mattress, a flashlight, and dozens of Polaroid photos of Elena sleeping. The killer hadn't just broken in. He had been living under her feet for months. He had listened to her footsteps, watched her through the floorboards, and planned his masterpiece while she slept just inches above him. To understand the depth of this horror, one must look into the psychological profile of the man they eventually caught. Silas Vane did not come from a broken home in the traditional sense. He came from a family of wealth and prestige, where perfection was the only acceptable standard. His brother Julian was the failure, the one who rebelled and got into trouble. Silas, however, was the golden child. He attended the finest medical schools, but while his peers were studying how to save lives, Silas was becoming obsessed with the aesthetics of death. He viewed the human body not as a living vessel, but as a medium like clay or canvas. When he was expelled from university, his family covered it up, sending him to a private estate where he could recover. Instead, he spent his days dissecting animals and, eventually, moving on to the complex architecture of the human form. The police discovery of the crawlspace revealed a chilling routine. Silas had used a stethoscope against the floorboards to track Elena's movements. He knew when she brushed her teeth, when she made tea, and when she fell into a deep sleep. He would emerge from the darkness through a hidden panel in the pantry, standing over her bed for hours, just watching her breathe. He didn't want to kill her at first. He wanted to possess her. The escalation happened when Elena met a man at the library, a young teacher named David. When Silas saw them talking through the window, his obsession curdled into a violent, possessive rage. He decided that if he couldn't have her as a living companion, he would keep her forever as an eternal object of beauty. The night of the murder was not a chaotic event. It was a silent, ritualistic procedure. Silas used a sedative to ensure Elena wouldn't scream, turning the house into a private theater. The forensic team found that he had played classical music, specifically Bach, while he worked. He spent nearly 12 hours in the house after she had passed, meticulously cleaning every surface, rearranging the lace, and ensuring that the presentation was perfect. When the police finally tracked Silas to a derelict basement in a neighboring county, they found his journals. These journals were filled with hundreds of pages of anatomical drawings, interspersed with poems about Elena. He called her the librarian of the afterlife. He had already selected his next target, a young woman who worked at the local bakery. The trial of Silas Vane was a media circus, but inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was one of pure, unadulterated dread. Even the defense attorneys seemed physically repulsed by their own client. Silas refused to show remorse, instead lecturing the court on the transience of flesh and the permanence of art. He was eventually found guilty on all counts and sentenced to multiple life terms in a maximum security psychiatric facility. But the damage was done. The lead detective, Miller, never spoke of the case again until his deathbed. He told his son that the worst part wasn't the body. It was the fact that the house felt alive with Silas's presence long after he was gone. The community of Willow Creek changed forever. The doors that were once left open were now reinforced with deadbolts and security chains. The library where Elena worked saw a sharp decline in visitors, as people couldn't look at the Victorian literature section without seeing her face. Even today, 30 years later, the blue-shingled house remains a grim monument. Urban explorers who have dared to enter the property report hearing a scratching sound beneath the floorboards, a rhythmic, steady scraping that sounds like someone writing in a journal. Local legend says that Silas left a secret in the walls of the house, a final piece of his dark art. That has yet to be discovered. The police have searched the house 3 times since the trial, but each search only leads to more questions. Some believe Silas had an accomplice, someone who helped him transport the heavy stones used in the ritual. Others think he was part of a larger, darker network of individuals obsessed with the macabre. Whatever the truth, the legacy of Elena Vance remains a haunting reminder that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes, they look like the polite man at the hardware store, or the quiet medical student with a bright future. They live in the shadows of our streets, and sometimes, they live right beneath our feet. The case of the porcelain doll murder continues to be taught in criminal psychology classes as a chilling example of the organized killer, someone whose intellect is as sharp as his blade. As the sun sets over Willow Creek, the shadows of the trees stretch across the empty yard of the Vance house, and the silence returns. A silence that isn't peaceful, but expectant. What was the true motive behind such a calculated display of horror? Was it a desperate attempt at immortality, or was it pure, cold-blooded madness? Some say Silas was trying to preserve what he loved most, while others see it as the ultimate act of destruction. What is your theory on why Silas chose such a gruesome method? Did he leave a hidden message in the arrangement of the room? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every theory, and some of your insights might even spark our next investigation. If you found this case as chilling as we did, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Dark Case Files for more deep dives into the shadows of true crime. Your support helps us keep these stories alive and ensures that victims like Elena Vance are never forgotten. Join our community of investigators today. Until next time, stay vigilant, because you never know who might be listening beneath the floorboards. Subscribe now.